Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the Micca MB42X budget bookshelf speakers. And this is part one of a three-part series for budget bookshelf speakers under $100. Some things you can expect in this series is obviously what they sound like, pros, cons, a little bit about the specs, what you can expect at this budget, and so on. The reason I chose to go with these to kick off this series is these are probably among the more popular budget bookshelf speakers in the under $100 category. They are $90 brand new on Amazon, or as little as $65 if you go with the renewed option, which I did because I bought these speakers with my own money just for the purpose of this review. So the dimensions, they are pretty small, guys. They're only about 9.5 inches high, 5.8 inches wide, and about 6.5 inches deep. The sensitivity is 85 decibels. They're good for 75 watts, and they will go as low as 60 hertz and as high as 20 kilohertz. Just a note on frequency response when we're talking about smaller speakers. A small speaker that goes down to 60 hertz and a big speaker that goes down to 60 hertz, typically it's not the same thing. The size really does make a big difference, right? So don't expect chest thumping levels of bass. Again, we are talking about a 4-inch midwoofer, 0.75 inch silk dome tweeter, and a really small cabinet overall. So first, I want to tell you kind of like just some things that just stuck out to me right away. I'll be honest, I haven't really had speakers this cheap in, maybe since I was a teenager. So the first thing I noticed was how light they are. These are fairly light speakers, but I did feel like the construction quality was decent enough. They use nice like Allen keys around the woofer and around the tweeter. It has a real 5-way binding post, as you can see on the back, and possibly the smallest port I've ever seen in my life. Anyhow. Magnetic grill, nice finish, nice touch, I guess I should say. I did listen to them with the grills on and the speakers pointing straight out into the room. I use the IotaVS integrated amplifier, my Bluesound Node 2i network streamer, and the cheapest interconnect and speaker cables I had laying around. Let's just get into the sound. So the top end, and real quick before we do, I want to make one thing clear. These speakers, when you first get them, if you do end up buying these, let them play for about 2 weeks before making any decisions. When I first set these up, I was somewhat aghast by the sound. It was incredibly bright and in my face, and I almost got a headache immediately. I told myself, maybe they need to break in. There's no way they're this bright. I feel like other YouTube reviewers would have talked about it if it was this bad. Maybe my set's broken. These are renewed, after all. Anyhow, I took them upstairs, left them in my bedroom for about 2 weeks where they just constantly played music, and 2 weeks later I brought them down here and plugged them in again. And this review is going to be based on that and with the tone control set to -2 decibels on treble and +3 decibels on bass. You definitely want tone controls or DSP if you're considering buying these speakers. You most likely will not want to listen to them flat whatsoever. Anyways, the top end. Even with the tone controls at the -2 decibel position, they are still tilted up. The higher end is going to be more on the sharp side. There's gonna be a hard edge to the top end frequency. So if you like that kind of sound, hey, you're already winning so far, right? Because there's kind of like two kinds of people. Some people like the smooth sound, like me. Some people like the more sharp sound, which is, I would say, a little bit closer to like live performance. Anyways, so it's a little bit bright. It's going to be a little bit forward, and it's going to be pushed out into the room a few feet. It's going to image fairly well and actually throw a pretty wide soundstage for how small these speakers are. Believe it or not, the soundstage does extend beyond the left and right boundaries of the speaker, which I don't think is something I would have said about a speaker that cost just $90, honestly. So that's one thing that really did impress me. Moving on to the mid-range. The mid-range also has a bump in there somewhere. I don't use any measuring equipment, so I can't tell you exactly where, but my belief is that was done in part to make them sound maybe a little bit louder because the sensitivity is only 85 decibels, but these didn't seem like the sensitivity was 85 decibels. I've had difficult to drive speakers that were 85 decibels. I know how deep I need to dig into that volume knob to get speakers with an 85 dB sensitivity to play loud, and I didn't have to do that with these. So I think that little bump in the mid-range gives a kind of feeling of loudness, which not a bad thing really. It didn't seem to overly color anything in either direction, but they were definitely on the, they're on the leaner side of neutral, if you will, a little bit clinical sounding and somewhat dry. I do think the mid-range and top end of these speakers is really going to be room dependent though. I did read an article about these speakers. I don't know who wrote it, what website it was on, but someone had taken some measurements and they said something about how because of the way these kind of like their off-axis response, they can sound fairly different in different rooms. Now, all speakers will sound different in different rooms, but these speakers especially could sound very different in different rooms. Anyhow, I digress. So there's not a whole lot else left to say about the mid-range. It was decent. It was better than I expected for the price. Oh, and the top end, by the way, did have actually a really good amount of sparkle and shimmer. Usually the top end on cheaper speakers is very, very bright, and there's not really a lot of detail at all, and there's not a lot of shimmer either. And what I say by shimmer is like when there's a cymbal crash is actually like a very layered sound in my opinion. There's a lot to it. And on a really cheap speaker, it's just like one sound. And on more expensive gear, it's like you can hear the layering of that cymbal crash as that cymbal kind of like resonates, right? And these have a little bit of that actually, which was kind of surprising at this price point. So we've gone through top end, we've gone through mid-range, let's get to the bass. So the bass changed a lot too over time actually. When I first plugged them in, bass was totally missing. 2 weeks later when I plugged them back in down here, there was actually some bass. I was very surprised. Maybe this is fairly stiff, maybe it had to break in, I don't know, I don't care. But at the +3 decibel position, which is where I set the IotaVS to, these actually sounded pretty decent. I listened to EDM, death metal, rap music, all kinds of stuff. And there was like nowhere really where bass was like totally missing like you would expect from such a small speaker. Now, was it thin? Yeah, of course. Was the quantity of it low? Yes, of course. It is a tiny, tiny budget speaker. But if this is your budget and you're like, I can't afford a sub, I've got like an amp, I got tone controls, and I can crank the, the EQ on these, like, will I be happy? Maybe, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't worry too much. I think they're definitely worth a shot. They will give you more bass than you would expect, I would say. And one thing about DSP and like tone controls, so it's usually been my experience for not even cheaper speakers, honestly, some expensive speakers are like this, but where you will adjust the tone controls, let's say bass, for example. Most speakers, you can do +1, +2, +3, and you're gonna be rewarded. Some speakers, once you go beyond that, the quality of the bass starts to diminish. It's almost like you're asking the speaker to do something it wasn't designed to do, or something that it doesn't want to do for whatever reason. The Revel Concerto 2 M16s are a good example of this. Beyond +2 or 3 decibels of bass, they somehow become boomy and boxy sounding. Whereas these don't, right? I cranked the decibels up to 6 on the bass, and these still continued to give me like more and more bass and maintain their quality and composure of bass, which was pretty cool. I actually read one review on Amazon where a guy said he had his DSP set to +10 dB on these. I don't know how they would sound like that. I didn't try that. But anyway, if you have the budget for a sub, I would definitely add a sub to something this small. If you don't, just make sure you have tone controls 100%. I think most people are going to want to trim the top end a little bit, and I think almost everyone will definitely want to add some bass, at least 3 decibels. Beyond that, the bass, was it the most articulate? No. Was it articulate enough for $90? Yeah, Did it pressurize my room? No. But was there some presence there? Yeah, there was, What you can expect at this price point, honestly, for these is just a speaker that kind of delivers as long as you're willing to play with your settings. And I think that's going to be the case for a lot of cheaper speakers. Now, the finish isn't the greatest. There's like a little part down here that's lifting, and I'm gonna flick it just so you can hear it. So it's like, I don't know if it's a vinyl finish or not. It almost feels like a thin paper, honestly. If I take the speaker off and like lift it, I can probably peel the whole thing off. I'm not going to. These are a renewed set, so maybe the previous owner did that. But even handling it, you can feel it's not a thick vinyl finish on it. So do be careful with these. Ideally, you probably want to put them somewhere, whether it's on your desktop, on stands in a small room or whatever, and try to just kind of leave them there. You definitely don't want to be bumping them into anything. This isn't the worst finish I've seen at this price point. I'll be honest. The other speakers in this series that I'm going to do, like one of them in particular has a really, really bad vinyl finish on it that's like already peeling brand new out of the box. And we'll get to that when I review that other one. And if I didn't already mention it, the three-part series is going to be these, which I'm reviewing right now, obviously, the Dayton B652 Air, and the third one is the Polk T15. But back to these. Overall, it's a good speaker. I don't know if I really want to do pros and cons on these because I didn't really view them that way. The budget was so low at under $100. Nothing really jumped out to me as a pro. Nothing really jumped out to me as a con. There were some things I thought were pretty cool, like the fact that you get a real 5-way binding post. Huge, huge thank you, Micca, for that. I really appreciate that. The Dayton B652 Air, for example, has spring terminals. I would have happily paid $8 more for that thing to have real binding posts. As someone who reviews gear, being able to just plug and unplug, it really makes my life easy, and I'm really going to have a annoying time when I do the final like trio comparison and I have to use those spring terminals, but I digress. So at the end of the day, I actually enjoyed these. I didn't think I would. I definitely thought I was too spoiled with the speakers that I normally listen to enjoy something this cheap. I had them up on the stands for at least a full day and listened to them for a full day. I did have to take some breaks because I did become a little bit fatigued here and there. I prefer a much smoother sound, but the top end that's like bright and sharp, it wasn't bad. You know, if that's the kind of thing you like, you will like this. It is livelier, it is energetic, and a lot of people do love that sound. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments below. I'll try to crank out the videos for the other two speakers in this series a little quicker than I normally do. Normally it's like a kind of a month between videos. And there's more stuff coming. I ordered the Zoo Omen Dirty Weekends. I have the SVS SB-2000 Pro here. I have some headphones to review also and some other stuff. Anyways, thank you for tuning in, and until next time, later.